Welcome to the Sourcing Exchange, where we connect, share, and discuss insights that shape the future of sourcing in the apparel industry.
G'day, Michael. Thanks for joining us on this will be our third Sourcing Exchange interview. And I have to say, I thought of you immediately. A little bit of a personal story. I'm 5 years into sourcing, as you know, and when I arrived here in Hong Kong, I really needed to get up to pace pretty quickly. And I was absolutely delighted to meet yourself. It was great to meet you early on. Your wealth of knowledge certainly fast-tracked my desperate need to learn in the industry, and I appreciate that we've held a friendship since. So I'm grateful for that, and as a consequence, you were one of the first cabs off the rank that came to mind. So thanks for joining. And as you know, the Sourcing Exchange is really just about we have such interesting job that touches on all corners of the globe, but also right down to the craftsmanship of a garment. So that's the idea. And maybe the best way to kick off is to start with a bit of an introduction. It'd be great to get to know who you are and what you're up to.
Right. So Michael Bennett. I'm British, but based in France. I guess my sourcing story started quite a long time ago. When I left college, I was very passionate about sport, and I still am. And I got a job with Decathlon, not in sourcing because it was a little bit early, but working in the store. And then after a while, I moved into what was then in those days Decathlon production, and I was given the responsibility for all of the production in India and Pakistan to start with, which was traditionally a place where a lot of sports goods were made. And so I found myself in Sialkot quite often, making footballs and boxing gloves and kimono for judo. And then we built that business up. My role changed, and I was given the responsibility of developing sourcing footprints from an origin perspective at Decathlon. And we opened up different markets such as Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam, all of which are figure prominently, I think, in today's sourcing footprint for Decathlon. So after a couple of years, I opened of working in France and traveling a lot, we moved to India and set up Decathlon in South India, and stayed there for quite some time. Then I moved in 2005. I left Decathlon, and since then I've worked for quite a few different companies with very much a focus on the sports industry. So I've worked for Puma for quite some time, based in Hong Kong, which is where we met, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also worked more recently for Champion up until its sale to ABG.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
Very interesting.
A long career.
Well, you know what I picked up? I picked up a couple of things. You cut across a number of brands, which I think people find really interesting. You cut across a number of countries, which I think people find very interesting. And you know what I picked up at the beginning? You mentioned you started your career in stores, and then you went from stores to the factory. And I
Factory
just
side.
factory
Yeah.
side, the factory side. Okay.
Yeah.
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 I just think there's so much value in having the experience from the stores and the factory side when you move into a retail brand.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm trying to think what's the most interesting deep dive from listeners' perspective, and perhaps the one that comes to mind for me. Well, there's two, but when you work across different countries, I guess that has to be difficult, particularly when you're opening offices, right? I always thought that when you open an office in a country, it just took off and things just kept happening as they always had, but it's not like that, right? And I'm not sure if
No,
you can
not
paint
at
a bit of a
all.
picture on that topic.
Sure. So, I mean, bear in mind as well, it was a very different world back in 1998 when we moved, when I set the office up in India. So I went there with my wife and very small daughter. And I knew the city obviously because we'd been working there with different factories for a year or so. But just setting up in a new country, doing all the administrative stuff. India's not necessarily the easiest place to set businesses up. And then just the logistics of it, finding an office, learning about all the peculiarities of working in India, making sure you've got like water supply, which is independent of the mains, and you have a backup generator and a UPS, and all that type of stuff was a very enriching experience. And then setting a team up. Hiring a small team of young kids who were barely younger than myself. I mean, I was in my late 20s, I think, when I went out there, late 20s, early 30s. And it was before the internet. I remember I put a notice in the Times of India, in the Chennai edition of the Times of India, saying French sports company opening up office, looking for textile engineers, etc. And I borrowed an office of one of my vendors, and Saturday morning I had 300 people queuing up outside my factory's sort of main office. It was a great experience. Loved every minute of it.
Hey,
I think today is a little bit different, and the world is a far more efficient place. I think, with the internet enabling you to do a lot of stuff much quicker. But back in those days, there was a lot of bits of paper and proper stamps on it, and an awful lot of waiting in rather hot offices to get things done.
Hey, and on the supplier side, I'm just imagining when you set up an office in India or any other country for that matter, you then double, triple, quadruple the production in that country, which means you're building existing relationships, but you're finding new relationships. I imagine that's challenging, and maybe the challenge is different between whether it's India or Vietnam or Sri Lanka. Any insights in relation to that side of things?
Yeah, I think the key is to keep focus. Is to have a strategy, a sourcing strategy of what you actually want to find and what you're looking for, and then stick to it. Even otherwise, you tend to get dispersed, and that's where you end up spending a lot of resources on very little gain. When we set up the office in India, it was very much focused on two areas, which was the existing area, which was all the horse riding equipment, which was up in the north of India, which had been going for years, and very, very talented artisanal factories. And we continue to work, well, Decathlon continues to work with those. And then down in the south, where we focused on knitted garments. And it was only once we got that really well oiled did we start looking at other things such as bicycles or footwear, and I think today they source an awful lot of stuff out of India, and they continue their local for local strategy. So stuff which is sold in India is made in India. And I'm also really happy to know that a few of the people I hired back in those days, they're still at Decathlon and in positions of Decathlon in India and in positions of considerable responsibilities. That's a source of pride, which I think, apart from the whole business aspect of our role, and you mentioned relationships, I think that when you're operating in an office and you're starting something up, you do create those relationships with your team as well. And I think that how to get a team to operate with efficiency and also with pleasure and with some degree of fun is really important. And that's one of the things that I've most enjoyed, I think, throughout my career.
Fantastic. There's one point there I want to touch on a little bit, just an observation. When you talked about focusing on a clear plan and getting it sounded like you get one category right, then move to the next category. It's certainly an observation I see is that when you move into a country or you want to develop a country, being patient And I guess there's to a degree managing expectations of the buying team and the designing team and the C-suite. When I meet professionals in sourcing, you see the amount of effort that goes into building the efficiency within the operation and the craftsmanship within the operation. I can only imagine, though, that your stakeholders just want to um, see see the capacity grow quicker and faster.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah,
not, doesn't appear to be that simple, right? Um,
yeah,
just
very
think,
much so. I think that um, I think that's a little bit company specific.
Mhm,
Um, So some companies really do focus on a long-term plan, and they're happy if you stay on that track. Whereas others, which are driven more by the stock price, their attention span is a lot shorter.
mhm.
So I think that you just have to adapt to the type of company that you're working with, really. I think.
Hey, that's probably a good segue to if we just talk about the current state of sourcing. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
remarkably interesting time.
Before
So,
we do that, Paul,
yeah.
could I just double back on, because earlier on you mentioned in our initial, just a few minutes ago, you mentioned firstly about interesting to start off in a store and having that insight, and then we went on to the sort of setting up an office. But let's go back to that initial comment you made about being at the front end, because I do think that's really important.
Hmm.
So if you're working in a retailer, you need to have that exposure to the people who buy the product.
Hmm.
I think that's really important. And in the sports industry, you also need to have that exposure to people who use the product.
Hmm.
Because they're very demanding clientele. And the other insight I think that working in an outlet in a retail store gives you is that full view of the supply chain and how little changes of how the product is packed or the quality of the box or how it's folded or where the label is stuck or whatever, all that stuff that makes for an efficient supply chain. You only get those insights if you're actually working and moving the boxes and putting the product on the shelf and things like that. So I think that's that's a really important aspect of sourcing is to see the entire supply chain from product conception right the way through to shipment and sale.
Mm.
I'd really encourage anybody who wants to go into the sourcing to get some experience of the front end as well.
It's an excellent, it's a really excellent observation. Because ultimately, all eyes are focused on enriching the consumer experience, right? And
Mm.
I guess the further up the supply chain you go, maybe it's easier to be disconnected. Hey, I don't know if this is a good example, but we were working with a European retailer in the sports industry, in the sports sector, and I kind of recall, interestingly, they really looked to France when it came to cycling equipment, but they really looked to Austria when it was about um, uh,
Mountaineering.
mountaineering, and I could list more and more examples, but it was very insightful how they kind of created perhaps centers of excellence when it came to when we think about bikes. Let's make sure we over-index our understanding of what's happening in France, and I don't know if that plays into your example, but it comes to mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, definitely. So I don't know if it's still the case because I left Decathlon a long time ago. But when I was there, they were setting up centers of excellence from a product perspective, which were in the place where the product was most used. So, for example, the whole Tribord was set up in Hondae, which is on the Atlantic coast,
Hmm.
right down in the Basque Country. Um, and there were Quechua, which was the mountaineering brand, was over in the French Alps. So that was a strategy which Decathlon certainly put into play to make sure that the connection with the user was very, very tight,
Hmm.
and people could use the product and feel the product all the time.
Actually, it's been a learning for me too that the innovation that goes into the product, be that the
Mm,
fabric or the sole of the shoe or whatever it may be, that does vary based on category, right? Like if we talk about socks and underwear, or if we
mm,
talk about outerwear, but once we talk about sportswear, invariably you start getting into really, you're now
yeah.
talking about product development teams that include chemists and all sorts of different crafts to try and find
Yeah.
the most innovative.
And all of the like, Puma and well, all of the big sports brands, they impact, the footwear is really the vehicle of the brand, and they spend enormous amounts of resources making sure that their footwear is of a very high quality, but also it differentiates itself from the other people in the market. And that's a key focus area for
Hmm.
Puma, I guess for Nike and Adidas, etc.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think it's essential.
yeah. And perhaps it's somewhat of a distinction between whether it's footwear, apparel, or hard
Mm.
goods. It's very, very different. So some things you can jump, some roles you can jump sectors, but some of those product development roles sound very specific to the category. But if maybe we
And
can.
the material you use as well. I worked for Coach Leatherwear for about 5 years, which was also a really interesting experience because of the importance of hand feel in the leather. So everything around Coach was how to industrialize what was basically an artisanal process, making a very beautiful handbag or wallet or whatever. But it's all focused on the sensation of the client, of the customer when he touched the
Mhm.
product, and that hand feel of getting the right smoothness, the right give in the leather, how you build that, and then how you can replicate it 100, 200, or 300,000 times because you're making a wallet or something, was absolutely essential.
Mhm.
And if the first time you sit in a product development meeting and you see everybody in New York and they're all sort of like staring mystically into space and feeling the leather, you're sort of thinking, is this for real? But then after a while, you sort of get into it and you think, God, yeah, no, it is really important, and you can start really feeling the difference. So
Yes.
that was really interesting.
Hey, one thing, I I see. Tell me if it's fair to say so, but I see it more so in sourcing product development world. Is that example you give with Coach? To me, it highlights the importance of having the right team composition and the
Mm.
reliance on a broad set of skills. Because I can imagine to achieve that hand feel and experience you refer to, there's probably six or seven or eight different talented people coming together. It's kind of unique in that regard, isn't it? I think anything upstream with the product development and sourcing, it reminds me of an orchestra. Like you need to bring together all the musicians if you want to play the music nicely. It stands out to me anyway. I'm not sure if you agree with that, but that is that how it all
Yeah,
comes together? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and to different degrees. I mean, if you're working in the leather industry, there's an awful lot of personal knowledge by from the tanners in achieving design intent,
Hmm.
and the initial the foundation must be that. And then, then it moves on through the production process and how you process that leather and how you build up how you build it up with the liners and the fillers and all this type of stuff. So yeah, it is trying to coordinate the activities of the all the different stakeholders in that development process to finish up with something which is rather nice.
Mm,
The
mm,
same is true, The same is true, I think, in the garment industry with with the fabrics. There's a real cult around sort of t-shirts and sweatshirts and just getting that right hand feel for that t-shirt. And so this was something which was very prevalent at Champion. We want to get this type of feel for this one and that type of feel for the other one, and it's slightly different processing, and all that's. I think that's really enjoyable.
Yeah, and it's making me laugh because I think on the flip side, I think it drives some people crazy, right? Because I think some when you start trying to do your job, not your job specifically, but people in companies, and the feedback is often the hand feels wrong, the hand feel of the fabric's wrong. It's just not as it's just not as tangible as normal feedback, which is whatever, a sales target or something. It clearly talks to the art and the craft that's embedded in the job. And I wonder even if, these days everyone's talking about how much technology can do for us. I wonder how technology can address the hand feel experience.
Yeah, yeah. You probably can. I mean, I remember having discussions with some of the guys at Coach saying, and they were saying, well, the hand feel needs to be this. And I said, well, put a number on it.
Yes.
Give me a number, I'll hit it.
Well, this is
So, yeah, it can be quite frustrating. And then and then you get that, then you go through from how do you replicate that in bulk? Something
yes.
which is lovingly made in a tailor shop by the ancient craftsman, and then how do you get that a couple 100,000 times is also an interesting problematic to solve.
That's really interesting. That's really, and I wonder what I see is each of these brands, particularly the ones that are leaning into either in luxury or leaning into luxury, or actually it doesn't have to even be the luxury sector.
Hmm.
You do really see, particularly in the successful ones, everything we're talking about deeply embedded in the culture. So,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
uh, p- people really love the product. And so as they're doing the job, you feel it in the culture. You feel that they want to. I love that question you put out there, which is the how do you maintain the beautiful craftsmanship at scale? People work hard to do that. It's really
Oh, yeah.
it's
Hmm.
really interesting.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Hey, so maybe we flip it to the current state of sourcing. Love to get your point of view.
Yeah, chaos, I think, is the short answer to that one. The whole tariff adventure which is going on in the US is certainly shaking things up. Um, Hopefully, towards the end of the year, there'll be things will be a little bit calmer. I think there is I think there are some sort of global movements which this current focus on tariffs into the US is just accelerating. Um, so I think again, I'm only talking for the areas which I work in, but I think that China is becoming more and more in a lot of areas focused on just it's China for China. There seems to be less product coming out. Certainly in cotton. Um, Bangladesh is having a hard time, and I think it's going to be quite some time before it bounces back. And I think the big winner is going to be India. I think that India is which has not fulfilled its potential over the last 10 or 20 years. I think today is going to have its day in the sun.
Hmm.
A lot of interesting investments. The government has put a lot of effort to make doing business here a lot easier. There is some movement on infrastructure, depending on the state that you're working in. So I think that India will come out in a stronger position than it has been for many years.
Hmm. Hmm. It's so, it's really fascinating on the topic of tariffs. to my surprise, every company is addressing it differently. I'm not too sure if you're talking across your network and hearing the same thing, but some really want to be patient and see what evolves. Others have already gone to the supply base and asked for discounts, and of course that's the last thing we hope for. But that's well and truly started. Others are shifted from strategic partnership models that they had in the past to becoming more transactional. Others are focused in on. I have a personal opinion. I'd like to get your opinion. Um, I'd rather not hit the suppliers with discounts. I'd rather look for opportunities to find value. And I think there's a lot of intrinsic value in focusing in on the operating model of the retailer and the brand. I think there's a lot of intrinsic value there. But I don't think you need to race to making such changing the relationship nature with your supply base. And I think there's a lot you can achieve with your supply base, actually. The supply base is wonderful in helping you find ways to engineer value or engineer out cost. Not sure your perspective on this topic.
I think a lot depends on the customer, on the brand. If a lot of the companies I've worked for, they've had strategic partnerships with vendors, and those which have been in place for many years, and there's a real when there is disruption in the supply chain, then they try and find a solution together. So I think one of the things that we had already started a few years ago was companies over here in Asia providing full service, especially for the US. So they would do a lot of the design, the development. All that would be centralized in a single design development place, but then the production would be so the bulk would be out in a low cost place, and then there was a gradual slide as capabilities improve to other places, such as in Kenya or also in Latin America. So looking at it because recently I've been working into the US market, which operates very differently from Europe. But what I saw working into the US was the partnerships on a very, very high level. You would the vendors would invest or were investing in production facilities in Latin America or to support business going into the US. So I think that there is that in a lot of companies there is still a partnership dialogue going on, rather than just you've got to drop your prices by 30% to cover the tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very specific to the customer, Mm-hmm. I think if you're selling into a trader or a smaller retailer or something, or a smaller brand, then perhaps the discussions are not the same.
Mm.
So very much horses for courses, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think that thing of having that whole thing of having a centralized design development and then shifting the production in a very structured way to the whichever manufacturing facility in whichever location makes sense. I think that's a model that's going to be more and more prevalent as we go forward. Certainly for the bigger brands, for the bigger brands, the bigger retailers.
I know sustainability's been a big part of your life. You've dabbled in your own startup on that front, but I think it's just a deep interest of yours. What do you think the current landscape is with sustainability at present?
I think that it's now just become part of doing business. It really is now. Again, I'm only referring to the markets that I operate in, but I think the sustainability today is it's at the heart of operations. It's just the way. It's just another. It's another facet of doing business today. The I think there's been enormous improvements in the quality of the or in compliance in a lot of factories, whether it be from a social perspective or from an environmental perspective. And I think that there has been a real groundswell of movement just to incorporate that into what we do. And I do feel, though, that there is still, to some extent, a disconnect between the brands and or the brands and retailers and the factories, in as far as I think a lot of buyers, whether they be a brand or a retailer, are unaware of the impact of some of the decisions or some of the requests that they make. They just don't see how that impacts a factory, and quite often how that drives non-compliance in the factory. Whether we're talking about changing the delivery dates, whether we're talking about changing the materials at the last minute, whether we're even to some extent negotiating price. I think there's still I think that the brands and the retailers do not, to a great extent, understand the impact of their actions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can only be addressed if there's a stronger dialogue and more confidence,
Mm-hmm.
more transparency and more confidence. There's still an awful lot of stuff which is hidden under the carpet, because people don't trust that you can discuss issues or whatever openly. I think a lot of factories are very concerned that if they do disclose issues, even if the root cause has been the actions of the brand, I think they're still very worried that this will have an impact on their business.
Which is probably well founded, right?
Yeah, most definitely.
And it must be so difficult to overcome, because the retailers and brands themselves often are in very challenging situations, and it's not as easy as people assume it is to run a retailer or a brand these days either. I find it a very complicated question. I don't know how. It's hard to think of the answer to that problem you have stated.
Yeah, I don't have a solution. If I had one, I'd do another startup and sail off into the sunset. But no, it is a very difficult problem to solve. And not an easy. I don't think there are any easy solutions.
You do make me think, because you talk about kind of the chasm between the retailer and the supplier on this topic. I feel like there's the same thing is within the brand themselves. Often it's between the sustainability team and the operations team. There's often a big disconnect there as well.
I think this is where a lot of brands have changed how they operate. So certainly Puma did, which was to start looking at impact.
Mm-hmm.
And to build that to actually focus on where you could have a positive impact on the industry. That was something that we were very, very focused on, and I think Puma continues to be focused on. It's all very well having sort of flagpole projects just to sort of, or a lighthouse project to sort of explain something and express a concept and things like that. But quite often there's very limited volume and therefore limited impact. But where a sustainability strategy does pay dividends is when the industry and the brands all team up.
Yeah.
I think unfortunately one area I think which has been there's still a lot of potential is just a sharing of having a global standard and sharing of reports. I mean, there's so much disruption still in factories because brands still have multiple requirements for different compliances. Quite often, I mean, I'm involved in some working with some factories at the moment, and you just see the amount of disruption ongoing because we're servicing several key retailers, and every week there's an audit for this or there's an audit for that. And I had hoped back in the days when I was involved in the SLCP that would be something which was going to disappear, but it seems to be getting worse. Or my current experiences, anyway.
Hey, Michael, geez, we could talk about any of these topics for another hour or two. This is why I wanted to do this series, because I just think it's so interesting. Was there just a hot topic that we didn't cover that you wanted to just make a quick comment on?
I think technology.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I've always been interested in is how you can use technology to make our business more efficient, because I think sourcing is not particularly efficiently set up. Again, it's a little bit dependent on who you're working for. But I seem to my inbox is just filled with endless streams of emails and multiple Excel sheets and things like that. And so there's been a lot of movement around 3D development and big data and sharing of information and collaborative platforms and all that type of stuff. But my inbox is still full of emails and Excel sheets. So somehow or other, I think we need to get to a place where there is a greater sharing of information, so that we can move away from these late night meetings with casts of thousands, where everybody thinks that they need to participate, and endless streams of emails of people just adding a word just to again, just to participate. So there's something still, I think, that we can do around technology. A lot of it is around definition of roles and responsibilities and giving people accountability to take decisions. I think that is something that we've lost in many cases, is just giving people that ability to say yes, move on.
Yes, because I mean, we have one of the longest development or lead times from beginning to end, like up to 18 months in some cases. And if you really dissect that, so much of that is just waiting time, waiting for somebody to approve something so it can go to the next, which is developing a garment takes a lot of people to participate to make it come to life. So it needs to go through a lot of people, but there's so much time just waiting. Okay, any kind of light at the end of the tunnel on that topic? And anyone who you're watching that's doing some good stuff, or is it more about trying to understand the problem more deeply?
Yeah, I think it's. I think some companies do it better than others, but I'm hopeful that gradually these things will trickle down into more retailers, into more brands. But yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, we're committed to it ourselves. We're working a lot on it, actually. I see a path to a different way of working. That perhaps one of the more difficult parts is change management. So to see the path on the technology side is maybe a little bit clearer to me these days. It's the change management that consumes my thinking the most. But
Yeah, because it's linked to, it's linked to people's jobs. So if your job is to sit in the head office and approve lab dips, then obviously you're not going to be too interested if you can do it in the sourcing office or do it digitally, or if the vendor does it, because you're not going to have a job. So I think you're right. A lot of this is change management and how to address that. But I think it's key. If we are to, because the length of our lead times is one of the great weaknesses of the industry, because you take decisions so far out that you inevitably create waste. Either your volume assumptions are out, or your color's wrong, or the styling's wrong, or this or that. So until we get to a place where we're able to leverage technology to speed things up, we're still going to be building what is intrinsically an inefficient model.
I think we should talk about this one next time. There's a lot to talk about. Hey, thanks so much. This is what I love about what we do. The conversation is so interesting, and I appreciate what you've contributed today. It's been super interesting. Thanks so much for that.
Thanks a lot, Paul, and talk soon. See you.